I am pleased to welcome the co-moderators, Mr. Naveen Kautam, Global Focal Point for Communities Discriminated on Work and Decent Youth Constituency, Major Group for Children and Youth, and the Inclusivity Project, and Ms. Shannon Lisa of the Global Focal Point Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform and co-lead of the UN Youth Fund Task Force and Pact for the Future Youth Working Group, as well as the distinguished speakers on my right-hand side for this segment. I wish to remind participants once again who wish to make comments or pose questions to press the microphone button on the console in front of you when the co-moderators open the floor for the interactive discussion of the segment. Those participants joining virtually are already inscribed and will be interspersed in the discussion. Interventions will be limited again to 2 minutes in order to hear from as many speakers as possible. I shall now give the floor to the co-moderators to conduct the discussion. I wish you productive deliberations.
Thank you, His Excellency, the Chair. Respected member delegates, distinguished participants, and fellow youth warriors for social justice, warm greetings for all. I'm Naveen Gautam, representing the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent and Major Group of Children and Youth. And of course, it's both an honor and a responsibility to stand here, not merely as an individual, but as a voice amongst millions whose histories and hopes have too often been silenced due to the long existing caste and descent-based discrimination we are facing. And as we gather to reflect on multilateralism and the road towards the World Social Summit, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. Not all voices have been heard equally in our global system. Power, privilege, prejudices, and of course the whole notion of purity and pollution, it continues to shape who sits at the table and who remains outside at the doors. The communities discriminated on work and dissent, or also known as CDWD, they represent over 270 million people across the globe, who are Haratin in Mauritania, Osu in Nigeria, and many others in Africa, Roma in Europe, Dalits in South Asia, and Burakumin in Japan, Palanki and Quilombola in Latin America are others. And these communities are bound by a common legacy of caste-based exclusion, social stigma, and systemic economic and political marginalization. And for centuries, they have been denied dignity, access to land, access to education, decent work, and justice, and of course, the most important part, political representation, relegated to the most demeaning forms of labor and too often treated as less than human. For many young people from the community discriminated on work and dissent and indigenous backgrounds, merely reaching this space to speak, to be seen, to be acknowledged is an act of resistance. Yet today, their presence marks a turning point. The preparation for the World Social Summit presents a historical opportunity for all of us and to ensure that the social justice, social development, and the inclusion are not afterthoughts, but the core of multilateral renewal. Through the Major Group of Children and Youth, we have witnessed a remarkable wave of youth-led mobilization, with more than 1,000 organizations across regions uniting to shape a collective agenda for justice and inclusion. From the Civil Society Conference in Nairobi to the ECOSOC Youth Forum, and of course the high-level political forum, youth from the refugee camps, indigenous territories, caste-affected villages, and informal settlements have actually stood together, not as beneficiaries, but as builders of new social contract, which is building up strongly. And of course, youth have led consultations that influenced key UN processes, from setting engagements priority to guiding the revitalization of the United Nations Youth Fund. Under the meaningful youth engagements co-principles, we are redefining what participation actually means. The recent UN Women Policy Brief on communities discriminated on work and dissent is a major example of milestone achieved. And let me tell you, the process was led by young women from the communities. This is what renewed multilateralism actually means. And this is, of course, what it should look like in the future as well. Not a charity, but co-creation. Not inclusion as a favor, but justice as a right. And as we look towards World Social Summit, let us be very clear. Those who have been historically excluded, including CDWD youth, must no longer be invited as observers, but recognized as equal partners in shaping global decisions. And the fight against casteism, racism, and descent-based discrimination must be central to the agenda of social justice and human rights. And today, as I stand, of course, I'm sitting right now here, moderating this session alongside my co-moderator, Ms. Shannon Lisa, our presence is itself a statement that we are reclaiming our rightful space in global discourse. Because the future we are building is not one of silence, it's one of solidarity, it's one of dignity, and it's one about the power which is shared by all of us. And now, I hand it over to my co-moderator, Ms. Shannon Lisa, Global Focal Point Chemical and Waste Youth Platforms. Shannon, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. Fellow youth excellencies, delegates, good evening. I'm Shannon Lisa with the Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform. We are the youth constituency to the BRS conventions, Minamata Convention, and Global Framework on Chemicals, and one of the 8 environmental constituencies of youth in the UN system. Our constituency brings youth voices to global processes on pollution because alongside global heating and biodiversity loss, our world is becoming increasingly toxified, the risks and costs from industry passed on to our generation. Children are born today pre-polluted with heavy metals, PFAS forever chemicals, microplastics, and a cocktail of other hazardous substances that irreversibly harm developing brains and bodies. Young children, indigenous youth, communities discriminated on work and dissent, including young waste pickers, are among those most severely impacted, yet remain the least represented in decision-making spaces meant to protect their health and rights. I'm also here today as a representative of MGCY on the Secretary General's Pact Implementation Working Group on Youth, wherein I serve as youth co-lead alongside DESA and the UN Youth Office on the UN Youth Fund Task Force. As we've heard reflected by speakers throughout our session, this has been a year of milestones for youth engagement across the United Nations. We saw the largest youth gathering ever at the UN during the 2025 ECOSOC Youth Forum in April. In September, we marked the 80th anniversary of the UN and 30th anniversary of the World Program of Action on Youth that convened the first ever high-level meeting on youth during the General Assembly High-Level Week. And today we join here for the first ever dedicated youth event under the UNGA Third Committee. These are not isolated moments, but the result of decades of consistent advocacy by the over 35 formal youth constituencies that have self-organized youth participation and policy contributions to more than 50 intergovernmental and 100 multi-stakeholder processes in the UN. Youth co-leadership has been at the heart of the Pact for the Future process, including the implementation phase, with UN entities and their youth constituency counterparts working together since the beginning of this year across 3 Pact Implementation Working Group on Youth task forces. As the task forces prepare to deliver the recommendations and outputs this month, we look to a present and future of multilateralism that builds on these structures, co-designed with youth, guided by our lived experiences, and accountable to the generations that will inherit its outcomes. It is in this spirit that we now turn to our panel discussion to explore what lies ahead for multilateralism and the UN, and how youth and other key stakeholders can contribute to and actively shape its renewal. I thank our panelists for joining us in this dialogue. We have Director Sarah Lister of the UN Development Program's Governance, Rule of Law, and Peacebuilding Hub, Qatar Youth Delegate to the UN, Mr. Salem Al-Hetfa, and Mr. Matthew Kelson, Senior Human Rights Advisor for the International Disability Alliance. Panelists, you will each have 4 minutes to share your perspective on a question I pose to you, and welcome to all of you. Director Lister, I will start with you. UNDP has one of the largest portfolios on youth engagement in the UN, including on country-level implementation. Can you share examples of strategies and mechanisms that can ensure youth meaningful engagement in multilateral processes, and also highlight some of the key achievements of UNDP in this regard?
Thank you, Moderator, and thank you to the Chair of the Third Committee and to the Major Group for Children and Youth for the invitation to speak at this very important event. And I'd like to thank also all the young people who are here today in the room and online for giving your precious time to this conversation. I was sitting up at the back and listening to your many interventions. I want to say thank you to you all. So at UNDP, we recognize the critical importance of creating spaces and opportunities for young people to meaningfully engage and influence global processes. As many have already said today, youth are not just advocates for the future, they are change makers today. And we see them leading, we see you leading climate action, driving digital innovation, and shaping more peaceful and inclusive societies. But recognizing that alone is not enough. We must continue to open doors, share decision-making spaces, and invest in youth empowerment across every forum, every policy, and at every level. Just 2 weeks ago, the high-level meeting on youth at the UN General Assembly offered a powerful example of what meaningful youth engagement can look like. Member states called for more systematic inclusion and participation of young people in decision-making spaces. To answer your question, allow me to share 3 ways UNDP is advancing this call to action. First, institutionalizing youth participation. UNDP supports governments in developing and implementing national action plans on youth, peace and security, embedding youth leadership into formal policy frameworks. Recent adoptions in the Gambia and Liberia are strong examples of translating global commitments into national policy. UNDP promotes safe spaces for dialogue, both online and offline. We support youth participation in political and civic spheres through national youth parliaments, caucuses and coalitions, online consultations and civic tech platforms. In Colombia, for example, UNDP and UNFPA partnered with 65 youth-led organizations to promote youth, especially young women, as peace builders. Second, co-designing youth empowerment. Young people must be seen as partners, not just beneficiaries, as you have already been saying today. UNDP prioritizes equal partnerships, ensuring young people are involved, from agenda setting to implementation. In Kenya and Guinea-Bissau, for instance, we've established youth sounding boards that give young people a direct voice in shaping UNDP programming aligned with national priorities. And third, we invest in youth leadership and capacity. Through the Youth for Climate initiative, co-led with the government of Italy, we've invested some $4 million in seed funding, mentorship, and technical support for 150 youth-led solutions across more than 50 countries. Over 30,000 young people are now engaged through our digital platform app in 104 languages. Next week, its flagship event in Brasilia will spotlight youth innovations and promote inclusive climate action in the lead up to COP. We also foster cross-sectoral partnerships with civil society, academia, the private sector, and youth networks to scale youth impact. In the lead up to COP30, we are working closely with the COP30 presidency, UNFCCC, UNGO, and others to ensure youth voices help shape climate negotiations. And our collaboration with Samsung through the Generation 17 initiative illustrates how digital storytelling can be used to amplify youth voices and drive meaningful engagement. Together, these efforts reflect our commitment to ensuring youth are not just included, but empowered to lead. So as we stand at this pivotal moment, marking 80 years of the United Nations and preparing for the World Social Summit, let us together seize this opportunity to reimagine multilateralism with young people at its core. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director, for highlighting those concrete strategies and mechanisms. And building on this, we'd now like to hear your perspective, Salem. As a young person from Qatar and as one of the first youth delegates of your country, what are your expectations from the World Social Summit and ensuring meaningful youth engagement at the summit? What steps is Qatar taking to advance youth action on the national level?
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Naveen and Shannon, for co-moderating this panel. And I'd like to thank MGCY for this invitation and this distinguished panel. First of all, as a young person from Qatar and one of the first youth delegates representing Qatar in the United Nations, I expect the World Social Summit to go beyond symbolic participations and initiate us as young leaders through the discussions and the tables. And I assure you, and I'm confident to say that we are, as a youth delegates, are part of the World Social Summit and going to be involved in the main discussions and part of the decision making. Qatar has already made concrete moves in this direction. For example, we have the youth delegates to the United Nations program. It trains young Qataris to represent Qatar, our country, at the UN high meetings. We are not there just as observers. We are also actively shaping international discussions and decisions. We also have the national youth policies, the Youth Transcend in Doha. It was developed with more than 66 government and semi-government entities to include youth participation. From education, employment, culture, and sustainability. It ensures that young people are not just an afterthought, but a driving force in the national development. One of the main initiatives is the one for the Sports and Youth Excellence Strategy, Quality Life and Future Ready. Youth, it connects health, mental well-being, talent, development with national goals, giving young people clear pathways to turn passion into skills into leadership. Also, we have multiple global platforms. Like next month in Doha, we are having the SLG, Student Leadership Global Summit. It brings leaders from all over the globe in Doha, the heart of Qatar. Also, we have the Doha Youth Forum that happens yearly, December. It brings every decision-making and leaders and heads of states at this meeting, the Doha Forum. We have a Youth Forum edition that we involve youth to participate, make proposals, and these proposals don't just stay in slides, they reach the decision makers and help shape policies. Also with a major group of youth and children, it's a young people that being credited for the social development, especially we are hosting the Social Summit, the World Social Summit. We have a youth forum for it, and I'm glad to say it's the first youth forum that's happening in Doha. All of these aren't only hypothetical initiatives. They are already changing how young people participate in shaping outcomes and implementations. But to go further, we need to embed youth at every stage of policy design, increase funding for youth-led pilot projects, create feedback loops that shows you said, we did, and make sure youth participate in summits like the Social Summit, not just as guests, but as contributors. Finally, before I'd like to conclude that we are not only leading our families, homes, or schools anymore. No, actually we are leading our countries and nations by uniting and joining hands together to find innovative solutions that was set by our predecessors, and find the solutions and solve all the world problems. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Salem, for sharing your expectations and those exciting initiatives, including the upcoming Youth Forum in Doha. Let's now explore how multilateral processes ensure that all rights holders, including persons with disabilities, are fully included. I now turn to Mr. Kelson. How are rights holders being included in key multilateral processes, including the implementation of the Pact for the Future and UN at 80? What more needs to be done to mainstream these voices?
Thank you so much, moderator, and I'm so pleased to be representing the International Disability Alliance at this important event today on building solutions for an inclusive future. I'd like to thank the chair of the Third Committee, Third Committee Secretariat, and the Major Group for Children and Youth for convening this important meeting. So the International Disability Alliance, or IDA, represents 5,000 organizations of persons with disabilities globally. We're in 182 countries, and we work collectively to advance the human rights of persons with disabilities with a united voice. So IDA has long championed the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities through an intersectional lens, and this, of course, includes advancing the rights of youth with disabilities and ensuring the future is shaped with and by them. So in this regard, IDA is really pleased to have a youth committee made up of 20 youth with disabilities from around the world. We consistently underscore the importance of youth with disabilities, championing the rights and meaningful inclusion of young people in the disability space, but also in all multilateral processes and beyond. So in that regard, I want to highlight some of the engagements that our youth committee has really participated in most recently, and some of the excellent work they've carried out. So in the context of the Summit of the Future, for example, the IDA Youth Committee released a call to action really outlining some of the key asks addressed to the international community. That's inclusive policies and participatory development agendas, supporting youth with disabilities to develop leadership skills, promoting platforms of dialogue and engagement, and empowering youth with disabilities through visibility, and involving youth with disabilities in decision-making processes and accountability mechanisms. So our youth committee really took forward these messages at the Summit of the Future, but also this year at the 2025 Global Disability Summit in Berlin. At HLPF in July, we had our youth committee member speak on behalf of the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, and also at the high-level meeting to commemorate the 30th anniversary of Action for Youth as part of High Level Week in September. Now we're really focused on the World Social Summit in Doha in November. Really pleased to be here with the youth delegate from Qatar. We've been really clear in our demands that the World Social Summit needs to chart a way forward that really ensures the full and equal participation of persons with disabilities, upholds their rights, and guarantees the resources and systems necessary for dignity and inclusion. We welcome that throughout the negotiation process of the Doha Political Declaration, many of the priorities were reflected by the global disability movement, and also there was a continued advocacy and leadership of organizations of persons with disabilities, including youth with disabilities. So a big priority for us will be carrying forward these messages in Doha at the summit in November, and we're very pleased to announce that our youth fellow, Esther Nagati from the International Disability Alliance will be attending and speaking at the summit. So to answer your question on what more needs to be done to really mainstream youth with disabilities voices, I want to refer to some of the key priorities that have been outlined by our youth committee. So first, meaningful youth engagement and effective participation. A lot of you have spoken about that today. Second, extending engagement beyond disability-only rooms. Youth with disabilities want to contribute to so many other issues: climate change, peace, employment, justice, peace building, humanitarian action, and crisis response. The importance of financing the engagement of youth, not just events. So really dedicating funds for youth participation, travel, online access, paid roles, core funding to organizations of persons with disabilities and youth with disabilities to prepare delegates and really to sustain action between summits. And finally, intergenerational governance, not tokenistic youth slots. So really pairing youth to co-lead with senior officials, trading experience, bringing fresh, innovative ideas, and rebuilding youth trust and confidence in institutions. So those are some of the key messages that our youth committee continues to carry forward in all the UN engagements, and will continue to do so as we move towards the social summit. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for the work you and IDA Committee are doing to strengthen the effectiveness and equity of multilateral decisions. And thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their experiences and ideas. I will now pass the floor back to Naveen to guide us into the next segment of our discussion, which is the interactive dialogue with all of you.
Thank you, Shannon. Without wasting much time, we are already running late. But before we move to the floor, let's also take a moment to think about what does the future of multilateralism looks like through a social inclusion lens, and of how can youth and marginalized stakeholders help to shape it despite existing barriers. And how can the Pact for the Future and outcomes of the World Social Summit serve as concrete roadmap to rebuild trust, close the implementation gap, and ensure intergenerational equity in the United Nations work globally. Let's have the interventions from the floor, but please, I hope you have pressed the button. And once it turns red, you are good to go. And please, young people, I request you don't panic. We will be with you, supporting you in case the button doesn't turn red and you're speaking. It never goes waste. So, let me invite the distinguished representative from Sierra Leone. The floor is yours.
Distinguished colleagues, esteemed youth delegates, permit me to stand on existing protocols. My name is Isaac Bayo. I am Sierra Leone's youth representative to the United Nations and also the lead youth peace and security expert to the United Nations Security Council. We must remember that during this committee session, member states have both the responsibility and the opportunity to translate the youth peace and security agenda from rhetoric to results. Nearly a decade after Resolution 2250, implementation remains uneven, with fewer than 30 member states adopting national action plans, youth-led organizations receiving less than 1% of global peace-building funds, and young people, particularly the most marginalized, still largely excluded from formal prevention and mediation spaces. Sierra Leone approaches this moment with deliberate purpose and tangible progress. As we prepare to assume the presidency of the Security Council in November, Sierra Leone will place youth, peace and security at the center of our presidency, focusing on institutionalizing youth participation, advancing prevention frameworks that convert early warning into early action, and championing sustainable financing for youth-led peace building. Guided by the development of our first national action plan on youth, peace and security, the establishment of a national steering committee and technical working group, and our leadership in advancing a zero-draft YPS resolution, Sierra Leone intends to ensure that the 10th anniversary of Resolution 2250 is not commemorative, but catalytic. This will be a moment where the Security Council reaffirms that youth are not subjects of peace, but we are all co-architects of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. May I request representative from Children and Youth International to take the floor, seat number 66. Thank you.
Representatives. My name is Yash Tharimala, and I represent the Youth Science Policy Interface. As we discuss strengthening multilateralism and finding pathways to progress, we must recognize that digital and emerging technologies play a key role in unlocking an inclusive future. A central gap in current AI governance is its failure to meaningfully center the core mandate of the Third Committee, protecting vulnerable groups and eliminating discrimination across intersectional groups. From a social inclusion lens, the future of multilateralism must guarantee algorithmic fairness. The Youth Outcome Document from the SDI Forum this year by the Youth Commission on Science, Engineering, Technology for SDGs highlights that the AI systems, if untrained on diverse and unethically collected data, disproportionately impact groups like displaced migrants and LGBTQI+ individuals, people with disabilities, and older persons. The UN system and member states must systemically invest and integrate evidence and policy recommendations generated by youth-led science networks to ensure solutions are context-specific and scalable. We need intergenerational governance forums and dialogues to ensure technologies like AI advance social development rather than entrench existing digital and social divides. Young people have the expertise and are bringing the data, the foresight, and innovative solutions needed to build an inclusive future. Thank you.
Thank you, Yash. Allow me to invite the distinguished representative of Portugal who's present with us online.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear youth representatives, we can only meet the needs and aspirations of all young people if we systematically listen to them, work alongside them, and provide meaningful opportunities for them to shape the future. This principle is enshrined in the Pact of the Future, which recognizes, as a matter of priority of the United Nations, that young engagement is essential in addressing the challenges we face globally. One of the key challenges before us today is precisely the future of multilateralism and the vital role of diplomatic relationship. In a world marked by armed conflicts, where children and young people are often the primary victims, it is crucial that we work to strengthen youth participation, safeguard their rights, and amplify the voice of those who are too often unheard, including young people from rural areas, migrants, communities, and minorities groups. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is one of the central challenges we must collectively reflect upon. All of us in this room are privileged to have the opportunity to speak out and be heard. But what about those who belong to marginalized communities, who live far from major decision-making centers? How can we encourage their participation? The strengthening of democracy and multilateralism must necessarily involve a deliberate focus on these more distant and often overlooked young youth populations, understanding their perspectives and incorporating their views into the formulation of public policies. Only by listening to all voices can we truly grasp the full range of youth concerns, enabling young people to become not merely beneficiaries, but also co-creators of the solution that will help build a world better than the one we inherit. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is André, and I'm the honor to serving as President of the National Youth Council, and it was a privilege to share this reflection with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now invite the representative from Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, who's present with us online.
Chairs, Excellencies, and young people. I'm speaking on behalf of the Asia Pacific Regional CSOs Engagement Mechanism, a collective of over 700 organizations from across 37 countries in the region recognized by UNESCO. The multidimensionality of our crises of cost of living, climate, conflict, debt, governance, and inequalities affecting billions around the world requires critical reforms that can no longer be casualties of consensus or convenience. The credibility of our multilateralism rests on our ability to walk the talk on transformation, to avoid falling prey to the fallacies of the neoliberal model that makes war profitable over peace, disease over well-being, disasters over safety, and dollars over dignity. UN80 is our opportunity then to redefine our approach to the foundational principles of the UN of peace, rights, and security as non-negotiable global commons respected and protected across the board. Parallelly, we must also be cognizant of the consequences of our actions, or lack of it in some cases, to avoid their intergenerational implications before it is too little, too late. The need for a bold, inclusive, and efficient multilateralism is our last frontier, to provide the leadership and will necessary for critical policy action to deliver on the promises of the Pact for the Future as a turning point for life at large. Excellencies, let us ensure that the fragilities of our times, caused by the frailties of a few, do not compromise the promise of our collective future. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I now invite the distinguished representative from Czechia.
Chair, delegates, young people today are not just affected by social challenges. We live them. We face unaffordable housing, unstable jobs, and education systems preparing us for yesterday's world, not tomorrow's. Entrepreneurship gives us a way to respond, to build solutions with impact that future generations will rely on, and that make older generations listen. Sigma Squared Society, a global network of young founders, have a motto. What if the world's most influential leaders of today were best friends 20 years ago? That's the kind of intergenerational trust we need to start building now. We often say that the future belongs to the youth, but the truth is the future belongs to those who build it together. And with that, I'm pleased to pass the floor to my colleague Teresia, the other youth delegate.
Distinguished delegates, last week, Czechia made history. We elected a record number of women and young people to parliament. It should have been a moment of pride, but a part of the debate started questioning whether they're too incompetent, too emotional, or not ready to lead. What holds women and youth back a lot of the times is the way society still views power. Consciously or not, many still believe that power naturally belongs to older men. But we have clear evidence that when women and youth are in parliament, it becomes less corrupt, more open, and more trusted. To change this bias, we need a cultural shift that starts with each of us. We need to challenge prejudice when we see it, make the leadership of women and youth the norm, and protect them from online hate that silences them before they can even begin. We may never feel ready, but we have to step up anyway, because democracy cannot afford to wait until we do. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the representative from Action Collective pour le Développement Intégral de Enfants Edda les Jeunes Filles. I'm very sorry if that's a wrong pronunciation. You have the floor now. Seat number 38. Yeah, sure.
Excellences, collègues et jeunes du monde. Je m'appelle Devine Sezgin et je suis un jeune turco-américain de 15 ans. My name is Devine Sezgin and I am a 15-year-old Turkish-American youth. It is a great honor to address you on behalf of Adifevea World and STG Youth Connect at this dialogue on the role of youth in shaping 21st century multilateralism. The future of multilateralism must not belong only to institutions. It must belong to young people collaborating across borders, disciplines, and generations. In this regard, artificial intelligence and digital innovation stand as powerful catalysts for inclusion and participation. At Adifevea World, we promote human-centered digital multilateralism, a system in which every young person, even in the rural areas of La République démocratique du Congo, such as South Kivu, can access knowledge and contribute to global data, co-creating local solutions to global challenges. We are training a new generation of AI youth leaders in the DRC, of young innovators capable of using technology to advance peace, equality, and sustainable development. This approach positions youth as not just beneficiaries, but as co-creators of public policies and innovative solutions, led by SDG education and awareness campaigns. However, access to connectivity remains a privilege for far too many. Millions of young Africans and millions of other nationalities around the world are still excluded from this digital revolution. This is why we call upon governments and international partners to treat the digital divide as an urgent matter of social justice and global governance. We, the youth of the world, are ready to use technology to map inequalities, track progress, and hold institutions accountable, measuring the multilateralism of tomorrow not by the number of agreements signed, but by the number of young people connected, empowered, and engaged. We will not wait for change, but we will build it together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was indeed powerful. Thank you. I now invite distinguished representative from Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It is my greatest pleasure to contribute on behalf of the young people of Antigua and Barbuda. It is essential to ground this conversation in real example of how young people are stepping forward with both courage and competence. In Antigua and Barbuda, we have seen an incredible increase in the number of young people pursuing higher education, directly transforming our generation into the true partners of progress. With the right investment, young people from small and developing states will strengthen trust in multilateral processes by bringing fresh perspectives, lived experiences, and academic preparation into the heart of negotiations. But our education and skills cannot stand alone. To unlock our full value, we cannot continue to accept tokenism. This is our collective call for support, mentorship, and respect from the international community. And Chair, this call goes hand in hand with the reality of small islands, because no matter how tall and talented, educated, or innovative our young people are, our future is tied to the survival and resilience of the states we represent. For small islands like mine, cooperation, compromise, and coordination are not a choice. We carry the weight of global circumstances we did not create. A fluctuation in taxes or a disruption in imports strips food from our tables and punishes the most vulnerable in our society. when the MVI is ignored. Our students and NGOs are labeled as high income and denied scholarships, grants, and programs that could truly empower our youth. When climate policy stall, it is our community underwater. It is our children collapsing in classrooms from heat stress. It is our people who will suffer from mental health issues. Chair, we are ready, we're innovative, and we are determined. What we ask for is very simple: to be empowered, to be mentored, and to be respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite the representative from Gelidas Instituto de Mulher Negra, who will present with us online. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and distinguished youth delegates. For youth of African descent, the issues under the third committee's purview are not abstract. They define daily realities, from barriers to education and employment, to racial profiling, digital discrimination, and unequal access to justice and healthcare. Systemic racism continues to shape the social development outcomes this committee seeks to advance. What has changed in recent years is the visibility of these inequalities, amplified by the pandemic, the digital divide, and the climate crisis, all of which have exposed how racial and economic injustice intersect. Young people of African descent are no longer asking to be included, but leading solutions in our communities. Yet too often, their innovations remain disconnected from global decision-making spaces such as this one. The gap between New York and the realities on the ground lies in representation and accountability. Resolutions here often reaffirm commitments, but they rarely translate into resources or follow-up mechanisms that reach marginalized youth. The third committee can bridge this gap by institutionalizing youth participation, particularly from racialized communities, in the drafting, monitoring, and evaluation of its outcomes. During this session, member states have the opportunity to advance concrete actions, support the mechanisms such as the People of African Descent Stakeholder Group and the Pact for the Future implementation, strengthen data disaggregation by race, age, gender, disability, territory, and other intersectionalities, and integrate anti-racism across all youth-related resolutions. Because countering racism is not a separate agenda, it is the foundation of social development and human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite the distinguished representative from Bulgaria. You have the floor now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, fellow youth. My name is Emily, and I am a youth delegate from Bulgaria. In the past months, in youth consultations we held across our country, young people repeatedly expressed the same sentiment. Education is where we feel most spoken about, but least spoken with. We need to involve students and youth organizations directly in shaping curricula, digital transformation, and reform priorities. Not after the decisions are made, but while they're being written. One simple step could be the creation of formal youth consultative bodies on education, where young people sit with ministries and educators to co-design policies and follow up on their impact. Because when we help write the rules, we start to trust the system again. And that's what intergenerational policy making really means. And in the end, this is what young people in Bulgaria are asking for: to implement the kind of education that makes us stay, not search for future somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite the representative from International Federation of Medical Students Association, who's with us online.
Thank you, Chair. Representing 1.5 million medical students, IFMSA envisions a future of multilateralism that is inclusive, accountable, and centered on health and well-being of children, adolescents, youth, and marginalized communities. True social inclusion requires co-creation, where young people, civil society, UN agencies, and member states collaborate to address health equity and social determinants of health, including education, economic opportunities, housing, and safe environments. IFMSA actively facilitates youth engagement across global health governance platforms, including the delegations to WHA, UNGA, high-level meetings, and other multilateral spaces. We participate to various working groups and policy advisory bodies, ensuring youth are not only present, but actively shaping health governance. At the same time, IFMSA builds capacities of youth at national and local levels, enabling them to translate global commitments into local actions. Youth are already making meaningful contributions, and when capacitated and provided structured spaces, they can achieve even greater impact. Thus, we call on all the stakeholders to establish interagency working groups with youth to tackle pressing health priorities, UHC, mental health, sexual and reproductive health, and NCDs, ensuring diverse representation and college reviews. Institutionalize permanent and sustainable youth platforms and to actively engage in policymaking, monitoring, and implementation at all levels, including through meaningful involvement in youth delegate programs. Furthermore, embed youth-led accountability and co-leadership frameworks, including within the Pact for Future, with measurable outcomes and transparent reporting. Support youth-driven innovation and knowledge exchange through mentorship, peer learning networks, and innovation grants. Furthermore, invest in self-care and health services adapted to adolescents and youth, ensuring access to resources that promote well-being and resilience. Last but not least, integrate youth voices systematically and meaningfully into high-level policy processes, including the World Social Summit and SDGs follow-ups. The future of multilateralism depends on all stakeholders working together with purpose and accountability. By giving youth real spaces and capacities to act, we can ensure every young person has the care, support, and opportunity to thrive. The question is, if youth are already contributing so much, how much more could be achieved if we are fully trusted, capacitated, and partnered with them? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's have a huge round of applause. We do have time to actually clap for everybody who spoke. And these are youth voices. Let's clap. Let's have a huge round of applause and let's motivate them. But unfortunately, we could not hear from all the speakers requesting the floor due to the high interest in the discussion. And as I move towards the closing part, but thanks to all our distinguished speakers, delegates, and youth representatives. And today's discussion has shown that renewing multilateralism is not just about rebuilding institutions, it's about rebuilding trust. It's about ensuring that those who have been excluded for too long, be it the communities discriminated on work and descent, indigenous people, persons with disability, migrants and refugee youth, and of course, all the frontline youth, are recognized as equal partners in shaping our collective future. And as we move towards the Second World Social Summit on Social Development in November, our challenge is clear: to transform dialogue into delivery and inclusion into lasting impact. And finally, a big thanks to Your Excellency, the Chair of the United Nations General Assembly Third Committee, for making sure that the youth from communities discriminated on work and descent and other marginalized youth voices are not just in the room, but on the same panel sharing this space as equal contributors to the dialogue. But as we celebrate this inclusion, I must also ask, where do we, the CDWD, Indigenous, refugee, and other historically marginalized youth, stand as the third committee deliberation continues? Thank you for listening to us, and the world also has to hear us now. With that, I hand it back to His Excellency, the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Naveen and Shannon, for the exceptional work as our co-moderators, and of course, our three